unmute her mic.
Today's reading comes from the Earth Charter, The Great Turning. We stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly interdependent and fragile, the future at once holds great peril and great promise. To move forward, we must recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. We must join together to bring forth a sustainable global society founded on respect for nature, universal human rights, economic justice, and a culture of peace. Towards this end, it is imperative that we, the peoples of the earth, declare our responsibility to one another, to the greater community of life, and to future generations. The Earth Charter 2000.
Thank you, Pamela. In January, I posted on Facebook and wrote greetings on email saying, Happy New Year! May 2020 bring us clear vision and informed hindsight. I thought it was quite clever, riffing on the idea of 2020 vision and the cliche that hindsight is 2020. It seemed to me that these qualities would support us culturally as we march into an election year with so much at stake. I had no idea what was in store for us. When the current happenings came out this past Thursday, one of our congregants sent me an email and wrote, Wow, shifting sands of paradigm. I like that. I have written about scientific paradigm and health vitality paradigm, and I'm looking forward to more perspectives. Well, here you go, Don Hornschmeyer. There are several definitions for paradigm, and for the context of this service, it is defined as an archetypal way of being, systems and patterns of behavior, a acculturation that has developed over time by trial and error, that became expectations and assumptions lived day to day without much examination, like, that's just the way things are. It was in the mid-1990s I saw a bumper sticker that said, Subvert the dominant paradigm. And I have been intrigued by that statement ever since. How should we subvert a paradigm? Why would this be beneficial, reasonable, or a useful undertaking? And how does a culture even identify their unexamined paradigm to subvert it in the first place? What I'm holding up this morning is current events that are exposing a long-held problematic paradigm, and these sands are shifting on a cataclysmic scale, one grain at a time. The first thing to shift this year is obviously the COVID-19 virus, and we have only begun to see the impact that this disease will shake us up with. But the paradigm shift I really want to hold up today is the awareness around white supremacy culture, systemic racism, and the rise of the second wave civil rights movement. This second wave civil rights movement has been coming for a very long time. What happened in the decades between the first civil rights movement in the 1960s and this current iteration is what I identify as a Pax Romana, a Roman peace, a false or forced peace that requires a mix of authoritarian intimidation and a willing complacency. It creates a fear of taking action and speaking up. It is an acceptance of the status quo that does not want to rock the boat, yet knowing deep inside that the boat is writhing on poisoned waters. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "They who passively accept evil are as much involved in it as they who help perpetuate it. And they who accept evil without protesting against it are really cooperating with it." Sadly, complacency is complicity. This dominant paradigm is constructed of capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy culture, and it depends on white people's complacent complicity to exist. This is a harsh truth, one that is uncomfortable and edgy, one that means, again, we must get out of our comfort zone, step up, speak out, show up, and be loud. The paradigm is shifting because it is being called out loud and clear with more media coverage than in the 60s due to cell phone technology and the Black Lives Matter movement. The powers that be and the people who are comfortable with the status quo are inclined to agitate against this truth and say, "I earned my privileges. I worked for every dollar. Life has been hard for me too." And honestly, no one is saying that a person hasn't worked hard, but it is saying that white supremacy culture favors light-skinned people, period. In the chat box and on one of the last slides, I will include resources. One in particular is an essay written by Peggy McIntosh called "Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack." And when I first read it, it blew my mind with all of my, when I was faced with all of my unearned and unquestioned privileges. And recently, one of our adult religious exploration program offerings was to watch a documentary called "The Long Shadow," followed by 2 Zoom discussion groups. And if you did not watch this excellent and informative documentary, I highly recommend it. I learned so much in that movie that fills in a lot of blanks regarding United States history. For instance, the Revolutionary War is not just about taxation and representation, but England had made slavery illegal, and the Southern plantation owners, as well as their Northern allies, could not let England limit the wealth being created by the blood and the bone of the enslaved. Unitarian Universalists have been abolitionists from the beginning, and it is a positive systemic part of our faith practice. Yet, we are still working on our own assumptions of privilege and uncovering our own participation in white supremacy culture. We strive to shake ourselves upside down and empty our pockets of racism. How do we turn this paradigm shift into a spiritual practice? As you doodle in the sand of your pie tin, take notice of what happens when you move your finger through the matter. Look at the shapes and the patterns, the influence of your action. What is the impact? Think small. Think big. Think practical and think metaphorical. This is a meditation. Granted, the powers that be want us to believe that we do not have power. Don't believe them. We have magnificent power. We are the co-creators of our culture. We are the meaning makers. We are the actuators. And always remember, what you do can have a tremendous impact, a rippling effect like a drop of water in a still pond. Our first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and that is a mighty sentiment. But how do we put it into action? Our second principle is justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And that's very nice in theory. How can we put ourselves forward to really make a difference in practice? As UUA President Reverend Susan Frederick Gray said, this is no time for a casual faith. Stepping up, speaking out, showing up, and being loud for racial justice could be one of the hardest things any of us will ever do, because we live in a country that was built on racial injustice. Yet, the lichen does break down the rock, and we are the tree roots that lift up the curb. As we traverse the shifting sands of paradigm, our footing may be unstable. We'll look down and not even be sure if we're stepping on solid ground. We may stumble and need to reach for support, a hand to hold, and a chair to sit on. And still, we will persist and we will prevail. Have no doubt, this is when our faith becomes action. Social justice is a spiritual practice. This is the work of the decade. To fill in the open spaces of the paradigm shift with justice, equality, and compassion. It is the most important thing we can do with our privilege. The old paradigm tells us things are just fine the way they are, and that is being blown away, and a new one is forming. So let us bring our unique talents and our collective wisdom to the fore, and with every action, hold a goal of a true and sustainable peace on earth in our hearts as the guiding light. So mote it be. Amen. And blessed be.